Hi, Scott Reid with NeoGenomics Laboratories. I am the Vice President of Companion Diagnostics and Alliances and wanted to speak today a little bit about NeoGenomics in the industry and what we are doing for patients with cancer and researchers who are developing next generation therapeutics for oncology. We are a premier oncology reference laboratory. We are global, based in the US, and we've been in business now for almost 20 years. We provide testing services for oncologists, hematologists, and hospitals. We service rural practices, small hospitals, and make high complexity oncology testing available to rural and underserved communities. NeoGenomics additionally provides testing services for pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies, and that's largely my role within the organization, looking to make sure that these companies have the tools and technologies available to generate and develop next generation oncology therapeutics. Now, NeoGenomics deploys many different technologies across the oncology testing spectrum. We provide, things like immunohistochemistry, next generation sequencing, polymerase chain reaction, and all of the different tools and techniques and approaches you would expect in a modern anatomic pathology laboratory. And we are always looking for new technologies to give us more bang for our buck. Biological biopsies, they're small, they're precious. How can we get more information from a patient sample? How can we make oncology testing less invasive? And these are the approaches and technologies that are going to continue to drive revenue growth and international growth for NeoGenomics in the future, in the next 5-10 years. Now, we additionally frequently work in the space of companion diagnostics, my realm, and here we're developing tests that improve patient care. What they do is determine if a patient is eligible for a therapeutic that specifically targets the genomic signature of their tumor. The use of these tests ensure that patients get the right drug at the right time and avoid therapies that may not work or very harsh therapies such as chemotherapy or radiation. And we are looking to increase the development and deployment of companion diagnostics for pharmaceutical companies and additionally for patients and oncologists within the community. Now, looking at our revenue mix right now, we are primarily driven by what I would call old school testing. It's standard pathology services, standard polymerase chain reaction services, but we're seeing great increases in some of these new hyperplexed multimodality tests, including next generation sequencing and multiplexed protein analysis. We expect over the coming years for these multiplex technologies to become more prevalent, allowing pharmaceutical companies and oncologists and the like to get more information from precious biological samples. And how does this impact our clients? What's our client base? Right now, we're about 80% hospitals, pathologists, oncologists, hematologists, and 20% of our services is for pharmaceutical companies, biotechs. And we expect the share of business within the biotech companies to continue to grow over the next 5-10 years. The development of oncology therapeutics is being largely driven by modern molecular techniques, meaning how can we develop a therapeutic that specifically targets the genomic or proteomic signature of the patient's tumor. Development of these therapeutics requires high complexity testing to determine is the drug working and how can we interrogate the biological signature, the biological response in the patient as the therapy is being given. And NeoGenomics is really driving the development of new tests to determine outcomes, determine is the drug working. And that is a continually growing part of our business. And we see this revenue mix to increasing in the next 5 years as more and more oncology companies adopt these newer drug development methodologies and require high complexity testing to support. And where do we see our revenue or new testing modalities or new approaches that are really going to drive revenue in the coming years? I see a lot of exciting developments in the realm of next generation sequencing. Next generation sequencing, we interrogate the DNA, RNA within a patient, but with next generation sequencing, we can look at all of the genome, the entirety of the tumor genome, rather than just looking at a single gene or single changes. And the adoption of next generation sequencing is going to allow us to get much more information from precious and limited samples. Second, multiplex protein analysis or multiplex immunofluorescence. As much with traditional PCR techniques, it's one sample, you're analyzing one protein at a time. We see great promise in new technologies that allow us to measure 5, 10, 40 proteins simultaneously in a single sample. And this allows us to really get a good idea of what's going on in that tumor and what therapies are going to be most appropriate for the patient. Third, liquid biopsies. This is a huge development whereby we no longer need to look into the tumor itself. Traditionally, you needed to take a biopsy, a piece of that tumor, in order to get a sense of what is the genomic signature, what is causing this cancer. Instead, we can now look at tumor cells that are shed into the surrounding blood. We can take a blood sample and get almost as much information as we could from the tumor directly. And the growth of these liquid biopsies or biopsy-based technologies are going to allow us to more readily interrogate what's going on with the cancer and develop very sensitive techniques to allow us to make therapy choices or determine response to drugs without actually needing to go in and take a biopsy from the tumor itself. And then finally, number 4, and tied to point number 3, is the development of minimal residual disease monitoring techniques. Traditionally, cancer was monitored by X-rays, MRIs, imaging, taking a look at what's happening with the tumor with traditional imaging techniques. Now that we can detect a tumor signature in the blood, this allows us to monitor response to therapy. Is the patient responding without imaging? We can look in the blood itself to determine if the tumor is responding and the tumor burden is shrinking within the patient. Overall, these 4 technologies are going to significantly drive our growth, both in the pharma space and the clinical reference laboratory space in the coming years. And as we close out this brief talk, I want to thank all of my colleagues who make this all possible. We've got a great team of pathologists and scientists at NeoGenomics who are always ready to talk, listen, and determine the best course of action, either when developing a new test for patients or working with hematologists and oncologists to find the optimal treatment solution for patients. Thank you for your time today, and we're always looking to hear from people in the industry. Thank you.